Well, we're looking forward to the book of Ecclesiastes. This is a very, very powerful book. I think it's very timely that we look at the book of Ecclesiastes at the beginning of 2025 because the thrust of this book will talk all about life. What's the life purpose? Why do we exist? Why are we on this planet? We'll see that the key word of the book of Ecclesiastes is the word vanity because it's very easy to have a life that's vain, that's worth nothing. And Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, but also we would say the most foolish man who ever lived because he had both sides of that coin in his life. He wrote this book of Ecclesiastes, which was very helpful to us. Let me go ahead and... Do I have my mic on? I don't have my mic. Sorry, Chris. I didn't have it on right. Let me open a word of prayer, and we'll get started. Father, thank you for this time that we have together to look at your word. We are very grateful that you've given us your truth, and there's a whole spectrum of your word and books that deal with everything in life, but probably there's nothing more important to deal with the purpose of life. And I pray that as we look at the book of Ecclesiastes, written almost 3,000 years ago, and yet it could have been written 2025 because it has such key implications for us. And I trust that you guide us, each of us, as we look at this truth, that we would be different, that we would face this new year differently because of this truth. Thank you, Lord, in your name. Amen. Well, the theme of the book of Ecclesiastes we'll see is vanity of vanities, all is vanity, which is really the thrust of the book. To not be at the end of your life and say, it was a waste. It was a waste. It was of no value. There really could be nothing more heartrending than for a believer even to get to the end of their life and say, did I really live for the glory of God? So I want to talk to the person right next to you, and actually, let's just do it out loud. What comes to your mind when you think of the book of Ecclesiastes? What comes to your mind? It's a pretty well-known book. Some secular universities will even have a class on Ecclesiastes or as a literature. But what comes to your mind when you think of the book of Ecclesiastes? Yes, Anne.
Spending all your time gathering money and pleasure.
Yes, spending all your time gathering money, pleasure. We're going to go through, there's a number of things that Solomon will just list out, and one of those is money, one of those is pleasure, many things. He's going to try it all. And Solomon had the resources to try it all. And he's like, he tries it more than anyone, and yet it's a waste. Yeah. What else? Yeah, Eric.
He talks about vanity. Correct me if I'm wrong. He talks about
Yes, absolutely. It's a vapor. It's a breath or wind. Yeah, and that's why I had that first picture. Is that it's just the wind, just the wind. It's like it's just and it's gone. James will talk about a vapor. It's just like I don't think you can see your breath this morning because of dew point, but when you see your breath and then it's gone, it's like that. Exactly. Okay. What else? Anything else comes to your mind? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I look at it as an exploration.
Yeah. Absolutely. I like the word you use. It's an exploration because he says that. He says, I'm going to try all these things. And he does over many, many, many years. And we'll talk about this later, but many scholars believe that he wrote Ecclesiastes at the end of his life after that exploration. And that he says, I tried it all. So, only a fool would say, well, I got to try it too. No, look at Solomon. He tried it all. And he said, nothing, everything is vain except one thing. And it's at the very end of chapter 12. Yeah, Becky.
Well, sadly.
Yes. His life becomes a picture. His life, that's a great observation, is Solomon's life is the illustration of this book. He lived this. It's not like he just it's revealed and he writes it, he lived this. So it's a very tragic, and yet in the end, it's not tragic, because God in his sovereignty brings him around, and in God's sovereignty, his example is so that we don't have to all follow his example. He tried it, but his conclusion, and we'll see he's very clear. This book has probably one of the clearest conclusions of any book in the Bible, because he says, in conclusion, this is my conclusion. And so, Solomon's life definitely was that. Okay? Let's, if you're not already, you can turn your notes. I forget what page it is. It's on page 229, I think. Is that right? 229? Okay. So I'm going to go through some things, and then some background to the book, and then we will we'll look at some highlights of the book, and then kind of the arguments, the vain things that he tried, and then we're going to look at his conclusion at the very end. Okay. Ecclesiastes, background, authorship, and date. Who wrote the book? I mean, it says right at the beginning there, it tells us the preacher. Now we, normally think something like what I do, and you don't think of this as a preacher. In Hebrew is kohelet, the preacher, the teacher. The exact meaning of this term is difficult. It's the NIV translates it teacher. Most Bibles will translate it as preacher. NIV in the margin will say the leader of the assembly. It's the word is connected to kind of a gathering, but he's the one that would lead the gathering or speak at the gathering, and so that's what he calls himself. He doesn't name himself, and yet it's very clear. It could only have been written. There's only one person who fits this quality. It's evident the author of the book could be none other than Solomon. Why? Because he identifies himself as what? The son of David. That right there, that limits it. There's several that could have done that, but no one else that's qualified just for the son of David. He's a king in Jerusalem. Oh, right there, there's only one guy. A son of David, king in Jerusalem, and he's king over Israel, so that means it's what? United kingdom, okay? He's talking about united kingdom, so right there it limits it really, really fast to who it could be. He describes himself as wiser than anyone who had ruled over Jerusalem before him. He's not making a proud statement. He's just making a true statement, right? I mean, Solomon was the one that God asked him. He said, what can I give you? Riches or long life or whatever? And he asked for wisdom. And he was the wisest man who ever lived. Absolutely. A builder of great projects. What are some of the projects that Solomon built? The temple. What else? His own palace. I mean, he was a major builder. You could go to Jerusalem, you could go to Israel today, and if you go with us when we go to our trip in 26, you'll see Solomon's pools. I mean, he built he had major building projects all over. He possessed numerous slaves, incomparable herds of sheep and cattle, great wealth, and a large harem. Okay, so you add all those things together, even though it doesn't name Solomon, it's very obvious. It was written by him. He said he was greater than anyone who lived in Jerusalem before him. The Solomonic authorship would place the writing about 970 to 931 BC. So it's almost 3,000 years ago when the book of Ecclesiastes is written, and yet we would say it's completely timeless. It's a timeless book. The rabbinic tradition says that Solomon wrote the Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, with its accent love in his youth. He wrote Proverbs, emphasis on practical problems in his maturity, probably earlier on, but then Ecclesiastes, emphasis on the emptiness of life in his old age. And so he wrote that toward the end of his life. And so if we were to put where it would be, so here we have Solomon kind of on our chart. Here's Solomon. Remember the white books are the timeline, and this particular, in its course, we're going through the books in the order that they were written and that they happened. And so we've gone this far. We went through the Pentateuch, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel. So Saul, David, and Solomon were the first three kings of Israel. And Solomon wrote this, and many scholars believe toward the end of his reign, okay? And so it was before the divided kingdom, before the kingdom is divided in 930. So it's, maybe, 935 BC is when he wrote this book. Unity and structure. Some want to say this was written by a number of authors in positive and negative. It's not, because it's very obviously written by one. Correct view, Ecclesiastes 1-2. We take the word of God. It says what? The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So we take the word of God. The word of God says what? It was written by Solomon. It doesn't give his name, but it gives description that he's the only one that could fit for that. Ecclesiastes represents the painful, Becky, you mentioned this, he's the example, the painful autobiography of Solomon. It's an autobiography, who for much of his life squandered God's blessings on his own personal pleasure rather than God's glory. And that's why I say it respectfully, that though he was the wisest man, he was also the greatest fool, because he had been given, I mean, look when David dies and turns the kingdom over to him. I mean, what does he walk into? And not just he walks into a kingdom that's all the enemies, pretty much all their enemies are defeated, right? They're united. The kingdom's united under the monarchy. There's no, I mean, it's just kind of like he hands it to him. But even what more did David give to him? David gave to him a heritage, a godly heritage of David, the man after God's own heart. Yes, David had a terrible sin, and yet he was truly a man after God's own heart. And Solomon knew that. Solomon had access to all the Davidic Psalms, right? And probably more, maybe, that we don't have. I mean, he had access to all that. He had access to, prophets who spoke directly to him. So he had great, great blessings. And yet, he squandered that on his own personal pleasure rather than God's glory. In the end, it seems like he turned around. He writes his book about that, but early on, and in the middle part, he didn't. He sought foreign wives. He multiplied wives. He multiplied chariots. All these horses. He multiplied all these things that God said, "Don't trust in those things. Don't give yourself to me, and then I will bless you." But he didn't. He wrote to warn generations after him and not to make the same tragic error. So it was written for us so that we can know, how can we not make these same mistakes? And all of us will, to a degree, right? Every one of us have had vain pursuits, right? All of us have. But the question is, to what degree will we listen to what God says to Solomon and seek to? Well, let's look at I will get there at the end, but just kind of a precursor is the conclusion. The preacher sought to find delightful words and to write words of truth correctly. The words of wise men are like goads, and the master of these collections are like well-driven nails. They are given by one shepherd. Who's the ultimate shepherd? He's not talking about himself. It's about God. God has given this book, this truth to us, to his people, so that we can live for his glory. This is a little chart. I think I might have it in your notes, but you can see here's David. This is kind of comparing David with Solomon. David, he had some pretty significant sins, but then he would confess. He numbered the people. David and Bathsheba, Uriah the Hittite, and yet he would do what? He would confess. And then we have sweet Psalms like Psalm 51 where he truly repents, broken before the Lord. Now, there were consequences to those things, yet the pattern of his life was that he walked with God. At Solomon, you can see Solomon's is kind of the dotted line, is that he's going along, but then it seems like, and I don't know when it happened, but he went down. He doesn't deal with it. He has a long period of time, and at the very end, I don't know if you can see it, but there's at the very end, he comes up and he seems like writes the book of Ecclesiastes, which shows the futility, because you kind of almost need a lifetime to do what he did in the book of Ecclesiastes. Try everything. He did it all. He tried everything, and yet. In the end, he says the conclusion we'll see is to fear God. So the book is inspired and is the very word of God. Deals with the critical question, how can man find meaning in life under the sun and in God's world? What's the purpose of this life? This is one of the greatest openers for the gospel, is Why are you here? Why is a person here? There's got to be, I don't know how many times I said to somebody, I was talking to our neighbor 2 weeks ago, and I'm over the fence, and trying to share the gospel with them, known him for 35 years, and I said, Rick, there's got to be something more to this life than just this. Even though they have a good life. They're dear people, dear friends, neat man, and yet there's got to be more than just this, right? Even a good life. If a man does not turn to God and create a judge, and he can't know true meaning. All is vanity without knowing the one who created all things. He's our creator. He established a time for all things, and you'll see that that's a time. There's a season for everything. Ecclesiastes 3 talks about. There's even secular. What was it? 1959. There's someone wrote a song about, literally quotes almost word for word except for 5 words, Ecclesiastes 3 on seasons. But God will also, it leaves out this part, will judge all men. There will be a judgment at the end for how we have lived this life. So what's the theme? I'm just kind of going down through your notes. If you don't have the notes, there's actually there's a borrower or books back in the back if you need one of those. The key word vanity expresses the futile attempt to be satisfied apart from God. It's absolutely futile. That's the theme of the book. If you were to say one word, the one word would be vanity, because that's the theme of the book. This word is used 37 times, expressing the many things hard to understand about life. All earthly goals and ambitions, when pursued as ends in themselves, produce only emptiness. You can pursue those things. Provision. There's all kinds of different things. One of the things you'll talk about is working hard, getting things accomplished. That's not a bad thing, but when you pursue anything as an end that's not God, then it only produces emptiness. It will not satisfy. Solomon's experience with the effects of the curse led him to view life without God as, he calls it, and Eric, you mentioned this, chasing after the wind. Like, okay, go catch the wind, right? Go catch the wind. You can't. It's impossible. And yet that's why I use this picture, is that's what our world is doing. It's you're chasing the wind. And early on it seems okay, but then you look at the very end of people's life and they're frustrated because you can never catch it. It's just the next day, just another dollar or another pleasure or another exciting adventure, whatever it is, but it's never quite enough. It will never satisfy. Why? Because, as Pascal said, God created us with a God-shaped vacuum inside of ourselves that only He can fill. Nothing else can do it. And if anyone could have done it, Solomon could have done it, right? He had endless resources. So the point of the book is what? Don't try it. Solomon did. It didn't work out well. Pursue God with everything in you. In spite of the seeming futility of man's existence, the wise man should fear God and then enjoy life as the gift from God. Okay? Pursue God first. Pursue God first. Fear Him, but then enjoy life as a special gift from Him in that process. I've often said, when you really enjoy God as your greatest delight, then you can enjoy those other things even more. That's someone that's trying to make those things be the satisfaction. You can enjoy family. You can enjoy friends. You can enjoy other pleasures. Why? Because you're not trying to force them to do something that God never designed them to do, and that only He can do. So it's not a book that is about asceticism. It's not the point of the book, just being ascetic. No, that's a dead-end street too. He'll actually talk about that, false religion. It's not as well. There's some recurring themes. Let's just look at some highlights before we get into the book itself. The first one is a recurring theme. Is fear God. I mean, this is a recurring theme in the book. Fear God. Ecclesiastes 12:13. The conclusion when all has been heard. Everything's written in this book, chapter 1 to 12. Here it is. Fear God. Keep His commandments, because this applies to every person. That's it. Fear the Lord. And by fear, we don't mean cower in abject terror. He's going to destroy you. Now, if you're on the wrong side of the gospel, yes, that is appropriate. But as a believer who Christ has taken the entire wrath of God, fear God means to reverence Him. It means to live in awe of Him and wonder of Him. And truly, as believers, Christians, we have lost our awe of God. You can look back 100 years, 200 years. There was more of a sense of the reverence of God. We've lost that. We want to view God as kind of the man upstairs, our good buddy, and yet God is a God that's to be reverenced, a grand and glorious view of Him. That's why here at our church, one of our major goals for our worship services together, it's not about the horizontal, it's about the vertical, to have a view of God, that God would reveal Himself through His Word, through the singing of God's people together, that we would be able to set aside the horizontal so that our hearts and minds be overwhelmed with the wonder and awe of God. That's what Psalm is driving us to when he talks about the fear of the Lord. Another, and this is a great theme. I love this theme. Good things are the gift of God, okay? So when you look at the book of Ecclesiastes, don't think, oh, it's just talking about anything I enjoy. That's bad. No. The book is very clear. Good things are a gift of God. And when you see things as a gift of God, then you can really enjoy them for the purpose God created them, because you're enjoying God first. He says in Ecclesiastes 2:24, there's nothing better than for a man to eat and drink and tell himself his labor is good. But then don't stop there. This also I've seen that is from the hand of God. For who can eat and who can have enjoyment without Him? So he's not saying good things are great by themselves. He's saying no, but as you look at the blessings in our lives, you can truly enjoy all those blessings. It could be, on a hot summer day, just a sweet, juicy piece of watermelon. It could be spending time with your spouse, whatever. It could be just being out in God's creation, going for a hike and seeing the beautiful mountains. It could be looking out on a starlit night and seeing the stars. All those sweet things that when we understand God and when we see those things from the hand of God, we can truly enjoy them. And so it's not a book of asceticism, but it's a book of saying you can never have true joy unless God's your first joy, and then you can really enjoy everything else by His grace and for His glory. This is one of my favorites from this book. Enjoy life with the woman whom you love, all the days of your fleeting life which He has given to you under the sun. For this is your reward in life and in your toil in which you have labored under the sun. God gives us, as believers, so many sweet blessings. For me, it's Martha. I mean, what a delight, what a joy. And God has given, many of you are married, you have spouses, you have children, grandchildren. God has given us those things, but we have to enjoy Him first, right? When those become an end, then you won't have true joy, right? Because what will happen? Then you'll begin to manipulate that situation. You'll be able to manipulate that relationship. You want to make that person satisfy you in ways that God never designed it to be, because you need to have your satisfaction in God. And then, if God in His sovereignty, that we don't have that, we still have joy in Him, because He is our ultimate satisfaction. So that's a key theme of the book. The good things. God has blessed us so wonderfully. God will judge the righteous and the wicked. Justice. There is a lot of justice in the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes 12:14. This is a very, very sobering verse. God will bring every act to judgment. When God says something to His Word, it's true, right? Every act. Not just some. Not just the real big bad ones. Not just the Hitlers or the Mussolinis. No. Everything. God will bring every act to judgment. Everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. This book talks a lot about justice. Part of it's a sweetness for believers. Let's say something happened at a workplace, or maybe someone took advantage of you in some kind of situation. You can really let it go, right? Why? Because you don't need to worry about it, because God is a God of justice. You can leave that with Him. But also it's a motivation that we do what's right? We tell the truth. We are honest in our dealings. Why? Because God's God of justice. Very clearly in this book. And then vanity, futility, obviously is a key theme in the book. All is vanity. All is vanity. Okay? Well, why don't you turn the person right next to you, okay? And I want you to ask this question. I've given you kind of a run-through, real quick, big picture of the book. We're going to actually go through the book in a moment. But why is the message from the book of Ecclesiastes so fitting for us today? It was written like 2,900 years ago. Newer is better, right? I don't think so. Why is this book? Talk to the person right next to you. Why is this book so fitting for us today? Maybe make us personal, even for me. Why is this fitting for me? Why do I need to hear this message today as we start 2025? Okay, go. Okay, let's pull it back together. What are some things? Why is this message of this 3,000-year-old book, why is it fitting for us today? Why? Or if it's not, we can go to something else. Yeah, Sherry.
Well, because there's nothing new on it now. We're the same things that were
Yep.
happening on the internet. We see it.
Great observation. There's nothing new under the sun. The book itself says that, there's no new sins that are invented. Like we said, that we've just learned how to sin more efficiently, with the internet and everything. So, but there's no new sins. There's no new sins. And so then this is applicable to us. Good. What else? Why are the truths in this book so important for us today? Fitting. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Sharon. Yeah.
Man is the same.
Yeah.
God created men, and we all have the same sinful nature.
Yeah. The nature of man is the same. We all have the same sinful nature. We're all born in sin. It hasn't changed. And so these are timeless truths because, we're the same. I mean, as you read through the book of Ecclesiastes, you go, oh yeah, that's today. I've seen that a lot. Yep. It's just so, it's as if he wrote it today. Even though some of the illustrations will be a little older, but the principle, absolutely, are the same. What else? Why is this book so fitting? Yeah, Betty Lou.
It brings, for me, accountability.
Okay. Yeah.
And then realizing
Yeah. This book brings accountability. This is one of those hard-hitting books, right? It deals with it. Every one of us, we read this book, there will be areas in our lives you're convicted. Absolutely. Say, oh, you're right. I'm pursuing that more than I'm pursuing God. And then we, like you say, we have to repent. And then we experience what? The joy of a right relationship with God restored. Yeah. Very, 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 very fitting. Anything else? Oh, I'm sorry, Birch.
One thing Heather and I talked about.
Right.
And it has to happen.
Right.
As Christians, we have the hope that God
Right.
we have promises. Much better job of that than
Right.
I ever would, but people are like,
Yeah, now. Yeah, people in our world, and even we have in us too, we have that aspect. There has to be justice, and we want to see it. We want to experience it, in the here and now. And that is a huge popular issue of justice. I mean, it's been going on for quite a number of years, many decades actually. Justice. We want justice now. Now, reality is why none of us want justice, right? We want grace, right? I want grace. I want mercy that only God provides. But also, we need to leave justice in the hands of the Lord. Why? Anytime people look at world history. I've read a lot of world history, and anytime humans try and exert justice, they never get it quite right. They just don't. They go too much, or they do the wrong people. That's an issue today. Justice. This is where true justice is when we fear the Lord, and then we can trust everything to Him. Okay, well, there's a number of vanities. We're going to go through some of these. These are just a whole bunch of them. Pleasure, wisdom, effort, achievement, life, rivalry, competition, selfish sacrifice, power, greed, accumulation, religion. There's all these vanities that he lists out in the book. And I don't think in your notes I have the first one. I don't know why, but it's obvious one. Human pleasure, verses 1 through 11, where this is the first one that he devotes. And we're going to look at, go through a fair number of those. This is just a chart from Talk Through the Bible, a real helpful book, on just kind of, the thesis, all is vanity, the proof, life is vain. What's the counsel? Fear God. Fear God. Okay? Let's look at specific issues in the book. Okay? I'm going to kind of bookend it by looking at the first passage, Ecclesiastes 1 to 3, and then I'm going to look at the last passage, Ecclesiastes 12, but in between those, I'm going to bookend it by looking and highlighting the key vanities that he pursues. Okay, so what we're going to do. We're going to intro, kind of his introduction. We're looking at some of the key vanities he says that he pursued that didn't work out well, and then we're going to look at the conclusion. What's the conclusion to the book? Okay? If you're not there in your Bible already, turn to Ecclesiastes 1 to 3. It's the introduction of the book. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All this vanity. It's obvious what the key word is. What advantage does a man have in all his work which he does under the sun? What's the advantage? So he gives the introduction here, and he identifies himself, as I already mentioned. He tells us who's writing this. So we know it's written by Solomon. Truly the most qualified man to write this book on what is the purpose of life. He's most qualified. He claims in chapter 12, he claims divine authority for this. Like, he's speaking the words of God. And so he's inspired. And it seems that he knows that he's inspired. These aren't just, Solomon's wise musing at the end of his life. No, he is speaking for God. He's an inspired biblical author. So introduction. Vanity, key theme. He identifies himself the author, and 5 times he uses habal, the Hebrew word for vanity. Probably maybe we would more use, or a word that we use would be meaningless. And I think NIV might use that word. Meaningless. 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 It's of no value. And the way it's kind of written in a superlative, it's like vanity of vanities. In other words, the greatest vanity you could ever imagine. He's talking about the thing that could be the most meaningless. Here's what it is: living a life without the fear of the Lord. And it's this word, vanity, is used throughout the work. This word meaningless is used throughout the book, and it's kind of at some key points. He'll try something, and then he'll say, that was meaningless. He'll try something else. That was meaningless. Try something else. That was meaningless. Sometimes he goes a number of verses. Sometimes just one verse. You say, that was meaningless. All these different things. And so it's going to be some test. Like, I forget, Kent or someone mentioned that it's an experiment. I'm going to experiment, and I'm going to see how does this really work. And he'll say, no, it's not. It's meaningless. The key word here, habal, meaningless. Term is used throughout the book to refer to something that has no substance, value, permanence, significance, or meaning. And when you read that, you say, oh yeah, I want to give my life to that. I want to give my life to something that's meaningless. I want to give my life to something that absolutely has no value. Well, no one in their right mind would want that, right? Everyone wants to say, I want a life that has meaning. We would use the word purpose, right? I want a life that has purpose. That's what this book is all about. All about that it's a true purpose. How you can have a life. It talks about worthless labor in verse 3. What advantage does man have in all the work which he does under the sun? Okay, humans work. Work is not because of the curse. Adam worked before the curse, right? Humans work. Look at most of you go to work, and you have a lot of people around you that work. It's a part of human life. It's called work for a reason. It's called labor for a reason. It's many times hard, many times not enjoyable. And he'll talk later on, there's joy in even work. He'll talk about that. But his point here is, what is the profit? To get up early, to go to bed late, to work hard. Why don't you just be a couch potato and just kind of lay around all the time? Now, some people do that. Now, that's not okay either. But he said, why don't you just give yourself to work all the time? And he says, no, there's no advantage. No advantage. It's truly vain. The only fulfilled life is the one that lives in recognition of God and lives in dependence on Him and lives for His glory. Then work can have value. But without that, work has no value. It's, at the end of a person's life, and they just gave themselves. They're worked hard. They're diligent. They had a good job. They had a good career. They provided for a family. They worked really, really, really hard. But that's all there was. Maybe they were an inventor. Maybe they invented a cure for some great disease or whatever. They had a life. They did all these things. They gave themselves. They sacrificed themselves. He says there's no advantage. There's no value if truly the person is not fearing the Lord. There's no gain. When he says under the sun, he means down here on earth. This is a very earthly book in the sense that it's how do you live your life. That's why you can look as you look at the different tests that he does. You could probably look around your neighborhood or look around your workplace and say, oh yeah, that's him. Oh yeah, that's him. And you could even look at yourself and say, that's the one I'm drawn to. That's the one I'm drawn to kind of try to find my value. He's saying, you know what? What's the advantage? And it's a theoretical question, but he's saying there is what? No advantage. No advantage to that if you're not fearing the Lord, if there's not a right relationship with God. So that's the introduction. That's the introduction to the book. It's these first three verses that's going to kind of introduce it. Now we're going to go through these different tests. Okay, let's look at some of the different. I'm not going to go all of them. But I'm going to highlight a number of them. Okay, the first one, and he starts here interestingly because I think this is the one that most people would be drawn most kind of just naturally to, in your raw humanness. And to be honest, this is where our society is in many, 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 many ways. It's this one. All that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure. Talking about not saying no to anything. Talking about having no self-control. For my heart was pleased because of all my labor. So I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all my labor, and this was my reward from all my labor. This is me time. I deserve this. And so I'm just going to give myself all the pleasure I want. Thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I exerted, and behold, all was vanity. There's that phrase again, striving after wind. And there was no profit under the sun. And if you look in the previous verses, he fills his life. He lists it out. He just lists, here's all the things I did. Wine. Gave myself to all the wine that I want just to kind of enjoy that. Houses. I built houses. He says, I built vineyards. I built gardens. I built parks. I built ponds. And some of them, actually, you can go to Israel. If you go on that, you'll see some of the things that he built. He gave themselves to all those things. He said he had all the slaves that he wanted that could do things for him. He had flocks and herds. He talks about the sexual appetite that he just fulfilled, as much as he could. With 300 wives and 700 concubines, he just gave himself to all the pleasures. He didn't say no to. If he wanted to do it, he did it. And he was the king, and so he could. Right? No one's going to say to him, no, you can't do that. He gave himself to all of that. He did not withhold any desire, which is amazing. And then what does he say? It was what? It was vain. It was vain. It was not, it did not satisfy. And we see our society. We can see even in ourselves where we give ourselves to various pleasures. In Hebrews chapter 9, it says that Moses, when he had grown old, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than to what? Enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. I mean, there are lots of pleasures out there. Lots of pleasures out there. Moses said, no, I'm not going to. He was at the top of the pile, right? I'm being raised in Egypt. But Solomon didn't say no. Solomon didn't say no. He gave himself to all of those things. And ultimately, he would say they can't satisfy. And so we can look at Solomon and say, I don't have to do that, right? Here's a man that's inspired by God that's saying, I tried that. It's a dead end. It's a cul-de-sac. It's chasing after the wind. Yeah, there'll be a temporary taste of pleasure. C.S. Lewis talks about how that there's more sin and less pleasure. There's a descending. I mean, like as in our neighborhood where we're in this church, I mean, no one intends to say, yeah, I want to become a crack addict. I want to live on the street. No one says that. No one decides that. I was listening to a sermon this week, and one of the guys said, I talked to people, when you were in second grade, did you say, that's what I want to be? I want to be living on the street, addicted to opiates. No one says that. And yet, pleasure will take you that direction if that becomes your God. Solomon says, I tried it, and it ultimately doesn't satisfy. So there's a vanity of pleasure. Vanity of wisdom. And he's the one that can speak to this, right? For there is no lasting, this is a second one. There's no lasting remembrance of the wise man as with the fool. This isn't in your notes. I'm giving you some freebies here so you can write that in the free spaces there. There's no lasting remembrance of the wise man as with the fool. Inasmuch as in the coming days all will be forgotten. And how the wise man and the fool alike die. They both die. Someone's really, really wise. A fool dies. No difference. So I hated life, for the work which we had done under the sun was grievous to me, because everything is futility and striving after wind. Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived, and yet he says that was inadequate. Now, when we see the word wisdom there, this is different than what he writes in Proverbs. Remember Proverbs 9:10? He will say, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. He's not talking about that kind of wisdom. He's talking about more just practical wisdom, always making the right decision. Like we see, he was the wisest man who ever lived. People come to him with decisions. He was able to make amazing decisions. Super wise. Super wise. Remember when the two mothers come, and the one baby has died, and the others has a live baby, his answers say, okay, just cut it in half. And the right one says, no. And he says, okay, that's very, very wise. Very, very wise. And you say, well, I was just more wise, I would be happy. It's not it. It's not able to make wise decisions. If anyone could have been happy to making wise decisions, it'd been Solomon. He says, nope, it won't satisfy. It's futility, it's striving after the wind. Someone may say, well, yeah, the reason I'm unhappy in life is because I just made a lot of foolish decisions. Well, it's not the foolish decisions in and of themselves. It's what those point to. And they point to a not following after God and not desiring him above all things. Vanity of work, okay? This one may hit close to home for many of us, okay? Really key. Ecclesiastes 2:22-23, for what does a man get in all his labor and his striving with which he labors under the sun? Because all his days his task is painful and grievous. Even at night his mind does not rest. Okay? He's saying even in work, being diligent, working hard, whether it's at your job, whether it's at home, Ephesians 5:18, making the most of the time because the days are evil. It's like, I'm just going to work hard. We have a name for this. What do we call this kind of person? A workaholic, okay? Solomon didn't write that, but that's what he's talking about. Someone just, a person's value, where they idolize accomplishment. They idolize work. Yes, I got how do you know? Did you have a good day today? People that struggle with this, they say, well, what do they say? What did I get done? How many boxes did I check off? I know it's kind of, you do something, I didn't have it on my list. I got to write it down so I can check it off. I know that seems kind of weird. But that's what it is. It's like there's too much value. It becomes an idol of getting things accomplished. Now, it's not to say it's a bad thing in and of itself, but when it replaces a true worship of God and reverence of him, when he throws a curve into your day and you didn't get anything done that you'd planned to get done on your list, and yet there's an opportunity to minister to someone or something happened, well, if that just wipes you out, okay, this isn't an idol. And Solomon addresses that. In the following verse, he says, there's nothing better for a man to eat and drink and tell himself his labor is good. This is verse 24. This also I've seen that is from the hand of God. He said, no, there's great blessing in being able to work hard. It's a value. But then in verse 25 of Ecclesiastes 2, he says, for who can eat and who can have enjoyment without him? So yeah, there's value in working hard, but it can't be an idol. It cannot be an end. Why? Because we all know there will come a time when we can't work anymore, right? There will. There will come a time when it's very difficult just to live. And if this is your idol, it will become very, very difficult for you. Or when someone gets in your way of a goal you have to getting something done. Solomon says, be careful. It's vain. Vanity of achievement. For to a person who is good in his sight, he has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. This is in verse 26. While to the sinner he has given the task of gathering and collecting, so that he may give to one who is good in God's sight. This too is vanity and striving after wind. This is a person who, they achieve things. This is they work hard and they have a good life. They got, what's the mantra? You've seen the bumper sticker, the person who dies with the most toys wins. But I don't add into it, but you're still dead. No, you can't take it with you. What do you win? You never saw a hearse pulling a U-Haul. I mean, it's done. But our society is so much. It's just an achievement. If I kind of have the, my best life now type of a thing. We work hard and we get all the American dream, maybe just a Christian form of the American dream. It's like Solomon says, no. Very appropriate warning. Matthew 6:19-21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, thieves break in and steal. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, thieves do not break in or steal. For your treasures, there will your heart be also. Sermon on the Mount, very appropriate warning. And then Christ told a great parable. He said, the land of a rich man was very productive, and he began reasoning to himself, what shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops? He'd worked hard. He had a farm. He had a ranch. He had all his crops. He said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns. I'll build larger ones. I'll store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, you have many goods laid for many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you, and now who will own what you have prepared? So is the man who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. That's what Solomon is talking about. Exactly that parable. So he's not just talking about the person that lives for pleasure and is taken with all the consequences of a life given to pleasure that gets worse and worse and worse. He's talking about at both ends of the spectrum. The person that works hard and does everything in our society says you need to do to be a contributing member of society, and you have the good life now. He says, no, it still doesn't satisfy. Yeah, Mike. Yeah, is not rich toward God. I would go back to Matthew 6. What does it mean not rich toward God? Treasures. Where do you store up your treasures? I mean, that's what Christ said, right? He says, don't store up yourselves treasure on earth. That's what that man did. He was storing up his treasure on earth. He's building the barns. He wasn't rich toward God. But what is being rich toward God? It's where our greatest treasures are in heaven, right? We lay up treasures in heaven by what? Living for his glory, starting with fearing him. Why? Because rust won't destroy that. Thieves can't steal it. It can't be taken away because you're rich toward God. And that's a riches that will last for how long? All eternity. All eternity. And there's an ultimate line for that of a person doesn't know Christ, but even as a Christian, Christ is speaking that to his followers, that we should, by his grace, lay up treasures in heaven so that we're rich toward God, that the things of this life, which Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5, what's going to happen to it anyway? It's all going to, in 1 Corinthians 3, it's all going to burn, right? It's all going to burn. And so it's only a timing issue. We're going to be rich toward God. And so Psalm is saying, be very careful on that. Vanity of human life. This also is an issue in our society. For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. Animals die. Your dog died. You're going to die. Your cat died. You're going to die. Birds, die. Insects die. I mean, it's the same. They all have the same breath. There's no advantage for man or beast. For all is vanity. It's like, man, that's depressing. I mean, thanks, John. That's really encouraging. I want to live the rest of 2025. No, what he's saying is, don't worship human life, just being alive. And our society does. That we, multiple billions of dollars are spent in our society to keep people younger. If you can't do that, at least appear like you're younger. All these things. Our society just pursues those. read about this guy named Brian Johnson. You've probably seen there's some articles about him. He's 46 and he's multi-millionaire. He spent most of the last, I think it's 5 years. He says, I'm not going to die. He spent more than $4 million in developing this system. He calls it Blueprint if you wanted to volunteer to be a part of it. And where he has a team of doctors and they tell him exactly what to do to get his life going. He takes 111 pills every day. What kind of life is that? He wears a baseball hat that shoots red light into his scalp, and anything that's accelerating aging, like eating a cookie or getting less than 8 hours of sleep, that's an act of violence, is what he calls those things. Why? Because he's valued biological human life. No, our lives are a gift, right? We need to be wise stewards. I'm not saying just go out and eat jelly beans and drink pop all day. No, be a wise steward. We need to exercise. We need to be wise stewards of our bodies so we can live for God's glory. But this isn't. So what happens when God calls you to lay down your life for him, like he has many believers through the history? That is not our number one God. And so it's a real danger, the vanity of human life. Another vanity of rivalry, call it competition. I've seen that every labor and every skill which is done as a result of rivalry between a man and his neighbor. This too is vanity and striving after the wind. This is amazing. You look at the workplace. You say, why is there so much competition in our workplace? Why is there so much rivalry? Well, Solomon tells that. That's just kind of endemic to human nature. People want to be better. It's kind of when you're in elementary school, kind of the king of the pile. Trying to who's going to get at the top of the pile. That's what it is. He says, you know what? That's just plain vanity. We make it different. It could be how much money you have, the kind of home you live in, the kind of car you drive, the kind of computer you have, how current is your phone, all that. It's all competition. He says, you know what? That's just vain. It's just vain. Vanity of sacrifice. Remember, I'm just going through these vanities, then we're going to get to the conclusion, okay? I know that seems really depressing. We're going to get to those, and we're going to get to the conclusion, which is super encouraging. Super encouraging. He says in Ecclesiastes 4, I looked again at vanity under the sun. Remember, he's doing this test. He's experimenting. There was a certain man without a dependent. In other words, a Scrooge. We'll call him that. That's, Charles Dickens. Having neither a son nor brother, yet there is no end to all his labor. He has no one that he's going to pass anything on to. His eyes were, yet there was no end to his labor. He worked super, super hard all the time. His eyes were not satisfied with riches. And he never asked. In other words, he's not being satisfied, he's not even enjoying his riches. He never asked this question, for whom am I laboring and depriving myself of pleasure? This too is vanity, and it's grievous under the sun. Other end of the spectrum. Remember, we saw that the one person just gives himself to all the earthly human pleasures. This is the other side of the spectrum. Denial. This person is just going to deny any pleasures. I'm not going to do any pleasures. It's a sacrifice. It's not self-sacrifice for others. It's just for self. Where, Scrooge, where he's not even going to enjoy a Christmas holiday. No, I'm just going to work. That's what he's talking about here. It's putting off temporary pleasure. It's the asceticism of history. Asceticism, which was very popular, but ultimately it wasn't based on godliness. Most of it was not based on godliness. It's just asceticism for the sake of asceticism. He said it's vanity. It's vain. There's an obvious one. The vanity of money. And if anyone could say this, Psalm could have said it. Fairly rich guy. Yeah, Bill Gates doesn't know nothing compared to him in that time frame. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with his income. This too is vanity. Bottom line statement. Look at your life. Are the richest people you know the happiest people you know? I mean, just look at our society. Are the richest people the happiest people? No, not at all. 1 Timothy 6. If we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. We have food, covering, but those who want to get rich, it's the desire issue, right? Fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful desires which plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money, not money, the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil. Some by longing for it have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. A very, very fitting warning for our society. The love of money. And it leads to many other, it says it's connected to many other struggles, many other sins, many other dangers. And Solomon says, 3,000 years ago, it's vain. Vanity of human religion. This is an interesting one that he talks about in Ecclesiastes 8, verse 10. So then I have seen the wicked buried, those who used to go in and out from the holy place, and they are soon forgotten in the city where they did this. This too is futility. Why is Solomon most qualified to write this? Where are they going in and out of? Who built the temple? Who built the temple? Solomon built the temple. He built this unbelievable structure. It was a religious structure. And he's saying he watched people go in and out of the very temple that he built, and yet they really didn't fear the Lord. And he says that empty religion has absolutely no value. It's not sufficient. So it's vain, even religion in our world, where you have people that say, people will say, I'm spiritual but not religious. Well, that's a religion. That's what it is. And say, no, you're not. You're not pursuing God. You're ultimately not spiritual at all. God's the only one way that you can. So a vanity. Isaiah 29:13, the Lord said, because this people draw near with their words and honor me with their lip service, but they remove their hearts far from me, and their reverence for me consists of tradition learned by rote. Prophet Isaiah said, I don't want your external religion. I don't want all your sacrifice. I don't want your religious ritual because your heart is far from me. That's what Solomon was talking about. So those are some of the major vanities. And I know it's that's kind of dark. That's kind of discouraging. But it's real, isn't it? I trust that you can see those in our world. But I also trust that you can see, there's one I'm drawn to. I can definitely see some there, because it's a warning to us to consider. How Solomon's describing everything as vanity, discouraging, depressing. It can be very discouraging. It can be very depressing. And so he's not going to end there, though. If you're not there, turn to chapter 12, because this is where if you cut off the book at chapter 11, it would be one of the most discouraging, depressing books in the whole Bible. It really would be. It's like, oh man, that's rough. That's so what's the point? Let's just go drive off a cliff. I mean, why? What's the point of this? Well, look at chapter 12, okay? And some of us can identify with this more than others because of our age. But in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, he's painting a picture. It's a very vivid picture. It's a picture of someone that's growing old, quite old. And it's showing kind of the end of their life, and they're looking back and they're saying, oh, what really mattered? What really mattered? So picture this, very picturesque. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. In other words, don't wait till you're old. That's the point. Don't wait till you're old. Before the evil days come and the years draw near when you say, I have no delight in them. In other words, man, life's just so hard. I'm old and life's hard and it's just hard to live. Before the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are darkened, the clouds return after rain. In the day that the watchmen of the house tremble, the mighty men stoop, okay, hard to walk. The grinding ones stand idle because they are few. What's that talking about? Teeth. They don't have any teeth. Your teeth are gone. You can't chew. Everything has to be soft. Those who look through the windows grow dim. Why am I wearing these? And when you just totally lose it, you can't see at all. And the doors on the street are shut as the sound of the grinding mill is low. One will rise at the sound of the bird. Can't sleep. All the daughters of the song will sing softly. Furthermore, men are, in other words, you can't hear. Everything seems so soft. Can't you talk a little louder? I can't hear you. That's what he's talking about. Furthermore, men are afraid of a high place. Why? Afraid they're going to stumble and fall, break something. Terrors in the road. The almond tree blossoms. It's talking about white hair, okay? Hair gets white. Or not at all. The grasshopper drags himself along, can't hardly make it. The Kuiper berry is ineffective. Man goes to his eternal home while mourners go about in the street. Remember him before the silver cord is broken. These are all metaphors for death. And the golden bowl is crushed. The pitcher by the wall is shattered. The wheel of the cistern is crushed. Those are all metaphors of death. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to the God who gave it. Vanity of vanities. all is vanity. That's the lead in, and then he goes to the conclusion. The conclusion when all has been heard is fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to, I'm sorry, it's chapter 12, not 4. The conclusion when all has been heard is fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person, for God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. So the book concludes. I love this book because it says, in case you didn't get it, here's obvious. Here's the conclusion. With an explicit recommendation to fear God, keep his commandments. In light of everything he said, here's the one thing that's not vain. These words are the culmination of many other implicit references to fear God and to serve him acceptably. The fact that revering God is every person's responsibility is underlined by the truth that God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing. I mean, we will be culpable for everything. So that should drive us to fear the Lord. Everyone is answerable to God for everything that he does. There will come a time when all will answer to God. Unbelievers will stand at the great white throne, judgment. Revelation 20, believers will stand before Christ at the bema seat, judgment, in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. The certainty and the finality of future judgment gives life the meaning for which Solomon has been searching. Okay? So that's the conclusion of the book. It's what? Fear the Lord. It's not give up and say, life is pointless. Life is meaningless. No. Life has great meaning. Life has great purpose when you live with an overarching value of fearing the Lord, living in reverence of him, living in awe of him. And then all these other things, the good things, you can enjoy because you're not trying to get them to satisfy you. Turn to the person right next to you. What implications does the book of Ecclesiastes have for your life today? Okay? Talk about that. Implications. We just did a run through the book of Ecclesiastes. What implications for you? 2025? You may be young, you may be middle-aged, you may be older. What are implications for you? Okay? Go. Okay, let's pull that together. You may want to talk with whoever you're talking to a little more after class, but what are some things you can think of? What are some implications for us today from this book? Implications. Implications. Or applications. Yeah, Ken.
Don't pursue the things of this world.
Okay? Don't just pursue don't pursue the things of this world. Our world says this is the one that dies with the most toys wins. Don't. And then I like the word, two parts. The second part was finish well. Finish well. It's so important. We want to finish well, right? It's not, life is not a sprint. Life's a marathon. And it's a marathon with hurdles, right? Lots of them. And so we want to finish well. And I think that's something to really pray for, to consider. Yeah, Lisa. Right.
So it's
Yeah.
not like, oh, I'll do that later.
Yeah, life is a marathon, but we don't know when the race ends, right? We don't know. And so we run every day as if today is the last day, that either, Christ may come back or God may call us home. We don't know. We don't know what it would. But so, it's a perspective. We still have a long haul perspective, but we're we're living today. We're not, a bad perspective would say, well, I can run hard later. No, this is saying run hard now by fearing the Lord now. Okay, very good observation, very good observation. Yeah, Stacy.
I think to fear God.
Yeah,
Healed God.
exactly.
So to fear God means trusting
Good.
knowing that it comes from His good hand. He will give us the strength to endure it.
Yeah, fearing the Lord, many of us, we don't know the trials that 2025 has or the next following years. We don't know. Some of them we may know, but a lot of them we don't. And fearing the Lord, it really must tie up with what? Trusting. If we fear God, we're going to trust Him. If we see Him with awe and wonder and reverence, we're going to trust Him. Absolutely. Okay, yeah, Larry. Yes. Yeah, the end of 1 John 5. Little children, beloved ones, guard yourself from idols. And he's talking to believers there, right? As the children, and that all of us, we need to know what are the tendency. It's good for you to be aware. What's my tendency? What is I drawn to? You say, that's dumb. Why would someone do that? But there's some other ones that you're very drawn to. You be very thoughtful about that. So you mentioned a number of these. Trust the God who is wise. These are actually in your notes. Trust the God who is wise. God has a plan, and all things are part of that plan. He has a time for everything. He does not let us know all things, but He knows what He is doing. That we can trust Him. His wisdom goes far beyond ours. If we really fear the Lord, like Solomon was talking about, we're going to really trust Him. And so if I'm not trusting Him, then I'm not fearing Him, right? I'm not. And so the call of this book is, one of the things is trust the God who is wise. Trust the God who is good. The word good is used 25 times in this book. Now, all the blessings that we have are a gift from the Lord. Remember, it's a gift, and we'll give an account of our stewardship of the gift. So this book is not a book of asceticism, like I told you. It's a book of goodness. It should encourage you. Wow, Lord, our lives are so good. So good. First, because of you, and then other things that you have blessed us with for your glory. And He doesn't want you to say, well, don't it? If that's fun, it must be sin. No. True joy, lasting joy, gives glory to God. The problem is where we find that joy. Is it in God Himself, and then the other blessings that He gives to us? We should enjoy our lives to the glory of God and remember that He gave it. The Jews read this book on the third day of the Feast of Tabernacles to emphasize joy over man's place in God's creation. That's when they read it. The Hebrew root for joy is found 17 times in the book. Trust the God who's just. This is very important. Trust God. He alone is totally wise, totally good, totally just, and we can fully depend on Him. And so we can trust Him. And so a follow-up part of this book is, if I'm fearing the Lord, I will clearly trust Him. Okay? Well, I trust the book of Ecclesiastes. We've gotten a little taste. So I did a kind of a fire hydrant, overwhelming you with that. I trust even a practical application is read the book. Read the book this week as an opportunity to say, God, what are you saying to me? What are the things that I'm drawn to, the idols of my heart? Solomon had his. Well, actually, he had them all. He tried them all. But where would you call me? To find in you my greatest joy, my greatest delight. And how can I grow in fearing you? How can I grow with the conclusion, fearing you and keeping your commandments? How can I grow in that for the glory of God? Okay. Let me pray. And if you have any questions, go ahead and come on up. I'd love to answer any of those questions you might have. Father, we thank you for this book, very convicting book. All of us know that there are areas where we easily are attracted to, that ultimately may not be sin in of themselves, and yet if we are not finding our true joy in you, they are. God, I pray that each one of us would find in your greatest joy and our greatest delight, and out of that we'd be able to enjoy the sweet blessings that you've given to us. In your name we pray. Amen.